Thor Thorson said, "You're gonna pack him in there," when I saw him about a month ago. I mean, there are a couple, 3 chairs left, so thank you, Kristen, for the introduction. As she mentioned, I am the president of the Readstown Area Historical Society. My interest in the history of Readstown actually started back in 1998. It was our sesquicentennial year. It was also the state's sesquicentennial year. And our local historian, John Syme, put out a call for a committee to form to plan some events to have in the village that year. And we had a pie and ice cream social in the park, and we had a medallion hunt, and I don't remember what all else, but it culminated with a Founders Day program that was held over Labor Day. Now, I remember John saying to me, you know, over the years I've had several people stop at the funeral home and ask me about the Reed and Hale family graves. And I guess who better to talk to about a cemetery than the funeral director? So he had accumulated some of their names and he passed those along to me. And with time, I got in touch with so many wonderful people. And they provided me with a wealth of family information, photos and genealogy research and deeds and all that, and I accumulated it in that 3-ring binder there. So these are the people who came to our Founders Day program, and they came from Indiana, Illinois, Idaho, and 2 of the people in the picture are from Viroqua. Some of you may remember Elma Miller. I don't know if the pointer is working. There it is. And then I believe his name is Eldon Gardner. And so there are some Hale Reed family people still in the area. And so I wanted to acknowledge them and also John Syme for inspiring us to delve into this, and it eventually led to our Historical Society group and the formation of our museum. So a few words about the Hale family. Daniel Reed himself never married, and he never had any children. He was born in Tioga County, New York in 1789. His family came from England, Northumbria, which is way up in the northeast corner of England, and the family found that they were they descended from princes, and they were landowners, and they were Puritans, and they arrived in the Americas in the 1600s. And so Daniel Reed and his family followed the progression west that families did, and he served in the War of 1812. And they eventually ended up in Michigan, and his sister, Anna Reed Hale, came with him and her family. She had quite a few children. One of her children was Benjamin Daniel Hale, there on the far left. And again, he never married, did not have children. And her daughter, Lydia Reed, married Thomas Cade, and the Cade name is still here in Viroqua. He served in the Black Hawk War. And then he had a niece, Edwina Hale, that married Francis Rogers, and they're also associated with Viroqua. In fact, just a note about Francis Rogers, some of the accounts of the Grandstaff murders, some of you are probably familiar with that. Some of the accounts tell of the posse that formed to track him down, and Francis Rogers was involved in that posse. And he and Benjamin Daniel Hale, or he preferred to just be called Daniel Hale, they ran the grist mill that Daniel Reed built on Reed's Creek when he settled in Readstown in 1848. So they were very, Daniel thought of them as his children, but he did not have any of his own. So Daniel Reed, when they were in Michigan, he acquired land by Liberty Pole. He purchased it from a young soldier who had served in the Mexican War, and at that time when you served in a war you were given a land grant, and Wisconsin was the Wild West, the far west at that time, and so Daniel Reed bought that, and that was not uncommon. A lot of the soldiers sold their land, and so that's how Daniel Reed ended up in the area. And then he went to Readstown, and I guess he liked the Kickapoo Valley because he purchased 80 acres of land down there. And that was on the west side of the river. It's about where Highway 171 intersects with 14. Now, at that time, this is a plat map I found over at the courthouse back in 1998 when I was doing some research. Back then, you actually had to go to courthouses and look through books and find stuff. And it's so much easier now. But right here, you can see it says Mill Race. And at the time, the creek, which became known as Reed's Creek, it flowed up along where our present-day Highway 14 is. And then in the 1920s, at some point, they moved that because of flooding issues. But he built a dam there and had a mill race, and you can see it notes that he had his sawmill there, not on the Kickapoo. And he had a grist mill. And by developing those mills, it attracted people to the community, because back then, if you had to travel to get supplies to Prairie du Chien or somewhere else, it could take you weeks with a wagon and oxen. So in 1855, he platted the village of Readstown along with two women, Elizabeth Weisel, and she was married to Reed's nephew, Orrin Weisel, and then Esther Austin. And the Austins were early pioneers in the new settlement. And in fact, I'm sorry, but this is just not a very good quality map. It's how old, 200 and some years old. But I was so excited when I found it at the courthouse. But this was drawn by William Austin, who I believe was a son of Esther Austin. I haven't been able to confirm that, but they definitely were related. So anyway, he platted that. He set up, and if you look at your timeline, we're not going to be able to cover everything. But one of the important points was that his nephew, Orrin Weisel, was granted a license to maintain a bridge across the Kickapoo. And the bridge was diagonal, and it went across over to our present day tourist park there. There was no Highway 14 back then. So he built that, and there's a really fascinating book. It's called The History of Vernon County, and it was published in 1884, and I'm sure they have a copy of it here. But it goes into great detail about the toll bridge and the rates that he charged for a team of oxen and a rider on a horseback and all that. So that is, if you ever have a chance, you should look through that book. It's quite thick, but it has quite a bit of the Readstown history, and that's where we were able to find a lot of our information. So he donated land for the school district, and he wanted to see to his little fledgling community, so he donated land for a church, and because we can't all be heathens down there in the valley, so we had to have a church and a school. And in 1855 or 54, the Bliss family arrived. This is, I should mention, Nelson Dudley Hale was a great nephew of Daniel Reed, and he was prominent in the village at the turn of the 20th century. There he is with his second wife, who happened to be the niece of his first wife. He married her after his first wife died. And the picture in the middle is their house. It was on the west side of the river, and it was taken the day of the funeral of his second wife. And it's all his children and grandchildren, all of them. And some family members that I got to know and really liked were John and Dorothy Klauser from South Dakota. They had a treasured family heirloom. They had the desk that her grandfather, Nelson Hale, had built. And they wanted to donate that to the Readstown Museum. She said they couldn't decide which family member to give it to. So they brought it back to Readstown. It was built in Readstown, and it went full circle, and it came back to Readstown, and we just love having it at our museum. And unfortunately, they are both gone now. They passed away in the last decade. In fact, Dorothy just passed away about a year ago. So we were gifted with, they brought us pictures and, as I mentioned, genealogy and a lot. And we're very grateful to that family. And Daniel Reed died in 1862. And his gravesite is in the Pioneer section of the cemetery. It's the most southerly part of the cemetery. And he has his stone just has a finger pointing to heaven, and it just has, when he died and his age, 73 years, his obituary says something to the effect that he was quite aged. And I'm thinking 73 doesn't seem, that's like the new 60 now or something, you know. But it's a very, very simple stone, and but we're very fortunate. You can see how clear, how well preserved that stone is there. And there are other family members buried right near him, his sister and some of these nieces and nephews. Another pioneer family is the Bliss family. The only photo I ever found of the father, Albert Bliss Sr., was in the book published in, I think it was 1898. It was called like Kickapoo, what is that called, that book? The Kickapoo Valley, the Gem of Wisconsin, I believe is the name. And that picture is in there. And they go into great detail about the Bliss family. And I believe he went, when he left Readstown, he went into politics and was an assemblyman. One of his daughters married James O. Davidson, who was an immigrant from Norway, and she taught him English, and he went on to be the governor of Wisconsin and served 2 terms. Another daughter married Kelvin E. Morley, and he also was involved in politics, and he had a position at the state level. They built the Bliss Hotel, and it was also the stagecoach stop, and it was the post office for many, many years, and you will find some of that information in your timeline. Their daughter-in-law was a postmaster there. Of course, the old books would say postmistress, but you don't want to ever say that to a female postmaster because they won't like that. But she was a postmaster for many years, and it was an early example, and one of my sources said it was an early example of a female holding a federal office in our state. The Morleys and the Bliss family, they're buried in the Readstown Cemetery. Very distinctive monuments, but they're in kind of bad condition with all the lichens on them. I'd like to see them get cleaned up. Kelvin Morley had a daughter, Laura, and He married Louisa Bliss. And some of you may have heard of Dr. George Mitchell. He's a veterinarian here in Viroqua, very well known and respected. And you know, you're pretty well known when there's a street named Mitchell. And we were so honored in 1998 when we dedicated the Bliss Memorial Park Monument. Margaret Burkhart, one of their daughters, came and she brought her daughter, Joanne Mellon, and they attended the dedication of the Bliss monument there at the park. And then another very important pioneer family was the Carter family, and they came also, I believe they came from Vermont. Their homestead was right along the present-day Highway 14 across from where the Kickapoo Creek side is now. The house is no longer standing there. Mary McFarland Carter, you can see she's a good Christian woman, posed with her Bible. They have, their Carter family cemetery is up on the top of what we call Carter Mountain now. And quite a few of the family members are buried there. And she was married to William Nelson Carter Sr. And the Carter men were part of the Civil War. William Carter Jr. there in the middle, along with his father, served in the Company C 18th Regiment. And the father is on the far right, and the son is, the father's on the far left and the son on the far right. Then there was a younger son, he was only 16, Charles Austin Carter, and he was in a different company, Company I, 17th Regiment. Unfortunately, he was wounded in Sherman's March to the Sea, and he died 2 weeks later. He is, I don't think I put a picture of it, but he was laid to rest in the Marietta National Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia. There were so many Wisconsin men that were killed there that there's a whole section of the cemetery, and the entrance is a big stone arch with a badger on top. And we do, Charles wrote letters home to his parents, and they saved them. And they gave us permission to print those letters. And we made a little booklet. I think we brought a few here, but they're fascinating to read. He always talked about when he got home, he was going to take care of them in their old age. And he sent them home money and told them to buy whatever they needed, and he never made it home. This is an 1896 plat map of Readstown. I think it's probably the second oldest map I have found. But down here is the original part that Daniel Reed platted, and also he did this here. You can see the diagonal bridge going across the Kickapoo River there. And the upper part of town was pretty undeveloped at this point. But that was all about to change because the train came in and they started a lumber manufacturing company right there where that diagonal bridge was located. So the Kickapoo Valley Manufacturing Company, oops, I went too fast here. Over there, they constructed the dam and they built what was called the I-beam bridge across there instead of Orrin Weisel's toll bridge. And here you can see they were going great guns here at the turn of the 20th century. With the advent of all the train coming and, the tracks being laid and houses being built, there was a great demand for the lumber. Now, when they put in the hydroelectric plant there, once this closed down, they were able to convert the dam, and you can see the dam building here. someone's posing on the bridge there. That's what it looked like back in the 30s. And then this picture was taken right before it was, I believe it was 1980 when that was taken down. And it was probably about 1970 when the village discontinued producing their own electricity and they joined the co-op. So the Readstown Improvement Company developed the land in the upper part, the south end of town, because by this point then, here's the train. The train had arrived in 1896 to Readstown. And it went right through that west side where the old businesses were, and it went right up town, and the depot was built up there. And so this granddaughter of the Blisses married a gentleman named Fay Briggs, and he had this idea in mind of developing this uptown. And he built this big double improvement company store that burned. But all these businesses, started around the park there, and the village was going great guns at that time. There's the Stump Dodger, as it was known. So some scenes from there. So at this time, the park area was really becoming developed. They built the bandstand. We do have a display board over there on the band and the turn of the century. The bandstand has always been a point of pride in our village. Most villages lost their bandstands, but we managed to keep ours. We had some fundraisers, and I'll never forget, we were $10,000 short, and John Syme won the drawing down at the advancement, and he won $10,000, and he gave it to finish the restoration. So, village has kept it up pretty good. So at the turn of the century, things were going, it was just building. There were like 15 new businesses that opened up. I read the newspapers from back then, and here is the town marshal, and they're putting in the cement sidewalks. They started delivering mail, rural mail. There's the diagonal bridge, and they're building the reservoir, and phone lines went in. So everything was going along pretty good. Here's just some street scenes, and we do have some board with a display of some of those, but you can see these are around the park area, and some more street scenes. I don't know why back then, but things always look so kind of tough, when you look at those old pictures, the streets look rough, and but that was life back then. This is the 1910s to the 30s. Things were still going pretty good in Readstown. There were still businesses in the uptown area. I always enjoy seeing the old vehicles. Oops, sorry about that. The bank came on. I don't know if it's, no, okay. So the bank was constructed. It is now in I think its third location. And we happen to have that cannonball safe at the museum. It was donated by Royce Jones. Some of you may remember him. He had the nursery, the Arboretum, and he, I think, purchased that at an auction. Arthur Ward was a prominent citizen in the community. And when the bank was at its final location, there was a robbery there. I don't know if any of you ever heard of that. 1932, there was a bank robbery. They never caught the robbers, but it's believed that they were a gang from Chicago. There were two men with a really nice car that had stayed at the Vernon Hotel there by the park. And farmers said they saw that roadster on back roads speeding, like they figured they were probably plotting their escape route and timing themselves. See, that was never solved. They never found who committed that robbery. But we ended up, I don't think they had the cannonball safe at that time, but I think after that, that's probably when they got that. We haven't been able to open that, so we're always wondering, was there any money in there, you know? So then in 1931, they platted the village, and I believe it's because of the advent of Highway 14 coming. And up to that point, oops, I'm sorry, I keep having problems with this. Up to that point, the road came in from Viola, and it was called Route 11, and it stopped. I don't know if you remember, well, you know where Stein Funeral Home is, and then Charles Street goes down across the river. That's the way Route 11 went, down that way. And so then Highway 14 came in the early 30s. Here's some bird's eye views. You can, at this point, you can see how they have clear cut the hillsides. The trees are gone because of the demand for the building, which would later lead to big problems, such as historic floods. This is a very early one, and you can make out barely right there, that diagonal bridge. And there was a schoolhouse in the park. And so even in the early 1900s, they started having floods. Part of that was due to removing the trees, grazing cattle on the steep hillsides, agricultural practices. They didn't use contour plowing and strip cropping. And part of it was just the geology of the valley, very steep hillsides, sandstone, so the water runs off very easily. So these were just like 3 historic floods. I don't need to remind anybody how terrible the 2018 flood was for our whole area. But I thought the 1935 one was interesting because right there is the Symes log cabin, and they had a restaurant. That would have been John Symes, I think, grandparents that had that restaurant there. So floods are not new. I thought it'd be interesting to do the population of Readstown by decades. So here you can see from the time in this 2-year span, the population jumped 90. And then again, between 1900 and 1910, it went up 112. But then it started going down. And when you get down to the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, you can see it reached its zenith, 1940. We had 584 people, and we now have 376. There was, kind of an exodus from these small communities to Janesville and Kenosha and Racine to work in factories at good jobs. So Readstown has declined in population, but we're still there. Here's the construction of Highway 14. That was the grand opening of Highway 14 in Readstown. And it was a huge celebration. And the new bridge was built there. I just can't believe this guy is standing on top of that bridge when they were building it. I'm like, wow. And so then bringing, the train had brought the businesses to the uptown area. Well, now you have Highway 14 running east to west. So now you start to see businesses popping up along Highway 14. On the west side, you had Harold and Gert's place, and that evolved to the Kickapoo Inn, and then that evolved into the Creekside today. John Mann's West Side Exchange was at the intersection there. And then the Standard Station had many different owners, and now that's the Trading Post site. And then further up on the east end, you had the bus depot and Kellogg's Cabins, and we had a lot of gas stations. With the advent of the highways, at one time, I think there were 4 different gas stations all at one time in Readstown. And we're also famous for our restaurants. So these were some early restaurants, and I think people still reminisce about the Dog and Sons. I have people talk about it all the time. They wish we still had the Dog and Sons. We, like I said, we're not complete heathens down in the valley. We have 3 churches. Now the Methodist Church no longer meets, but the Church of Christ does. And Peace Lutheran is still referred to as the new church. But I go to that church and we're actually not new anymore. We're almost 60 years old, but some of the sites of the old post office, now that first one there, that's actually the second post office, and it's still standing when you're coming into Readstown. If you look on the bank, it's still there. It's in really bad shape. And this one was about where the new municipal building is. So, and I just had to throw this one in there. This was from May 1947, and they had a snowstorm. It was the end of May. Some of you are like, yeah, you remember that. The Syme family and Oscar Anderson, they were important families in the community, furniture, funeral home. My husband recently took this picture here. We had it on our calendar. We dedicated our calendar to John this last year. We put out a pictorial calendar every year. We are famous for some of these rock formations. Unfortunately, that McSherry Cave, the landowner he had that blasted. Like in the 1920s, that Elephant Rock is gone. But these young men were on an outing there. They posed on top, and you can see the Kickapoo Valley down behind them there. I really like. They have their little lunch pails with them and a dog, and there's a series of pictures they took there. And our present day, we have quite a few businesses over on the west side. The Dregneys own several of them. Siri Lund still has her hair salon in the uptown area, and then there's 2 bars left, Roosters and Shovelheads. Low Manufacturing, the main plant burned there that was built in the 70s, but they have retained one of their buildings and they still work in town. And then the Callaways arrived in town, Frank and Myrna in 1970, and then their son, has this shop, and then there's one over on the west side. And this is the Kickapoo Trading Post that grew around that old gas station. And we erected this Veterans Memorial, which is very nice, and there's an old World War I monument with the bandstand behind there. And we invite you to come to the Readstown Museum. We have a lot of interesting collections. Our newest one came from the Crook family, Edith Ward Crook and Fred Crook family. They brought us this his really old organ. It's a pump organ. And their grandfather, Arthur Ward, now if you recall, I showed you the bank picture, and he was in that picture. That he was given that for his 8th grade graduation. So one of the family members had it in their possession, and they decided it needed to come back to Readstown. And down here, Orban Syme, that would have been Hank and Harlan Syme's brother. He had some very interesting, unusual instruments, and he traveled around and put on shows. And we have quite a nice display of school stuff that Nan's going to talk here shortly about the schools. And we can boast the largest fish that ever caught in the Kickapoo River was caught in Readstown. Now, this was before AI, so it's gotta be true, right? I like that one, so I had to use that to conclude my discussion. I don't wanna take more time away from Nan, so that concludes my part.
Okay, well, I'm Nan Alexander and I taught at Readstown for 35 years. Third grade, sometimes second, third, sometimes third and fourth, but always third. When I started teaching there, my son was in fourth grade, I was in third grade, and my daughter was in second grade. And my daughter says, we moved on and mom stayed in third grade. So I'd like to tell you a little bit, I've got posters around for each one of the rural schools, so I'll start with the rural schools.
Nan, can you bring the microphone closer to you?
Sure. Okay, I'll move over. I'll tell you more about the rural schools, because you kind of hit on the other ones anyway, so. Okay, so Folsom.
Oh, wait, no, this is Spring Valley, you want me to find Folsom?
I can find Spring.
Okay.
I don't, somebody else did my pictures for me, so I'm too old to know how to do all that stuff.
That's,
But you got Spring Valley?
yeah,
Okay. Well, Spring Valley School was built in 1860, and that's when most of these are back in the 1800s, of course. And all of them seem to start out with a log building, and eventually it burned, and then they built a frame building. That's almost every one of these schools has the same kind of story. The school was closed in 1960 when the kids went into the Readstown Elementary building. And then that school was sold, and it was moved down to the corner of Highway 1461 and County Trunk T. It was sold to a couple from La Crosse, and they used it for weekends. And now they sold it to some guys that are there for hunting more than that. So, and then the land that was where the school was, the community club built a park shelter there, so they could still use their area for get-togethers and things. And but when this building was still up there, the community club used it, and the 4-H club. There was a 4-H club called Readstown Ramblers 4-H club, and they used that building too. So the community kind of wanted to keep it, but you know, to fix it up and get the foundation built and everything, they decided it was best to go that route. So there is a park shelter there. If you need to have a picnic out, then you're welcome to use it. Okay, what we got next? Manning. Oh, that Manning School. It was built in 1856 and later replaced with a frame building again. The school closed in 1961. The building was moved in 1975 and later just tore down. So if anybody's here that went to the Manning School, your picture is probably on that poster back there. Anybody here from the Manning School?
Was assistant with the integrated?
Oh, yeah. So, what's the next?
the Kickapoo Center.
Kickapoo Center. Well, that was kind of an interesting one. It was built in 1857, and of course it burnt and was replaced with a frame. And in 1940, it was moved out of the floodplain, which I'm sure it flooded and flooded and flooded right there. And then the school was closed in 1961, and the building was converted to a private home, and it's still a private home at Kickapoo Center. So. Sugar Grove.
Yeah.
Sugar Grove was built in 1856 to start with. A few years later, it was replaced with a hand-hewed log building, and that one burnt and replaced again. And when they replaced it that time, they built across the road and up the hill a little ways. So eventually it was closed in 1961, and the building was sold for $1. And that building was moved over to the Church of Christ, and it's it was added on to the Church of Christ, so it's still part of the Church of Christ, church there. It was added on to the north side of the church, so. Okay. And I know there's some here from Day Creek, so, because my husband's in that picture, so.
Where is Deep Creek?
Day Creek is at Holcomb Road,
Oh, okay.
right there.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
I think
yes,
that's the entrance.
Okay, so it was built in 1857. 11 years later, frame building replaced it. And 35 years later, the building burnt and it was replaced with another frame building.
You think it's students burning?
Yes.
Sometimes they get out of date. So in 1957, there was a meeting held, and it was to see if they wanted to move in with the Readstown school system. So they voted to go with the Readstown system, and in the fall of 1960, they went in with Readstown. So the building was sold to Earl Lowry. Some of you remember Earl Lowry was the electrician in Readstown, and he purchased that building and moved it down by his house, which at that time his house was across from Ice Cream on 14th. So that garage that's kind of in behind the house was the old Day Creek School. Okay.
Sherry.
1860 it was built and blah, 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 out on County Truck M. There's nothing there now that shows where it was at at all, so, but,
I think there's cement steps there.
oh, are there?
Yeah, all in that patio.
So in 1932 and 33,
What?
Archie Anderson was the teacher, and the students made a signature quilt. And all their names are on this quilt, and the quilt is at this museum. So some of the names were Anderson, Bolstead, Drake, Hanson, Broughton, Sherry, Simpson, Owen. Those sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
So, so it was torn down and it closed in 1961. Oh, Folsom. Folsom is very interesting. The first one was built in 1865. 19 years later, there was a new one built on the same site. And the first school was sold for $11.50. And it was moved and going to be used for a woodshed. So the name Folsom comes from President Cleveland's wife's maiden name. How they picked that, I don't know. But anyway, her maiden name was Folsom, and that's where it got its name. School was held in the months of May and June, December, January, and February. Evidently, they were needed to farm in the other months, huh? There were about 10 students that attended the first school. The people that lived there had to go to Liberty Pole to get their mail. So in 1888, there was a store started in Folsom, and President Cleveland appointed the postmaster there, so Folsom got their post office then. In 1939, electric lights were put into the school, and the wood heater was replaced with an oil burner. I bet that was really an update, right? The enrollment in 1939 was 34 students. It was the second largest school in Vernon County. And it graduated 7 students that year, which was also the second largest graduating class. Oh boy, now we're getting some good stuff. You must be waiting on me. Okay, Readstown School, the first one was built in 1854. And it was built over on the west side by where we talked about Daniel Reed's things. There's no picture of the first school. Probably where the Crooked River canoes were, in that area. So the first building that they used for the school was also used for other things. So then they decided they needed to build just a school, just to be used for the school. So the third building was located in the tourist park, and it was a 2-story building. And it included grades 1 through 9. The first graduating class was in 1877. So about in 1898, the enrollment had increased, so they needed more room. So they used the Methodist church, where it was just up the street, which is where Charlie Street lives now. So they're by the Joe Blow's. Well, then they had to have another teacher, so they have 3 teachers now and 2 buildings. Well, when they built the brick school, this school, in 1902, then they didn't need those other schools, and so all the grades were up there. So it was a 2-story building erected, and then in 1936, they built another little building that was used for the grade school and the kitchen. That's where Crazy Frank lives, or Crazy Frank lived in that white building there. So then in 1938, there was another building erected behind that building that was used for agriculture shop. And then they had a blacktop playground, which was kind of unusual back then, I think. But it also had a jungle gym, and it had swings and a large slide. And the ball diamond was where the Lutheran church is now. And many, many ball games were played there because lots of towns up and down the river came to Readstown to play their ball games. So it was a very busy place there.
I might add the bricks for that school. They were, that Nelson Dudley Hale, that grandnephew of Daniel Reed, he was involved, and he and his sons made the brick for that building.
So
I don't know, there's another view of it.
it was a big building.
The bell, now does that show the bell up in that tower?
Can't see it.
I don't see it, but we have the bell outside of the museum. The Heal family donated it.
Yeah. So the Readstown building was constructed in 1960, the Readstown Elementary building. And at that time, Kickapoo Area Schools was developing, and it included Soldiers Grove, Readstown, and Viola. Then eventually,
Not originally.
keep listening.
Oh, originally.
Then there was a vote made, and they voted West Lima would come in and Soldiers Grove would go out, which put Viola in the middle. So, so that's what happened way back. So, the last class that graduated from Readstown High School was 1964. And then in 1969, the 7th and 8th graders started attending school in Viola, and Kickapoo Junior High was developed. In 1978, the big brick school was taken down, and in 1998, the Readstown school closed and was consolidated and moved up to Viola, to the Kickapoo area schools.
Did you have a picture of the old school in Viola? Should I be looking for that? No, okay.
I didn't, so. Okay, any questions? How many people here attended Readstown School? Oh, quite a few. Good.
I started there, that was, I think, completed in about 1960.
Yes,
And I started first grade there. I went to kindergarten in that,
in the white building?
yes, down there by the high school. But that was only about 2 years old when we went there. We thought, oh, this is fabulous, it was only a couple of years old. It was so nice.
Yeah. Well, somebody asked me how I like moving up to the new school. I said, well, I can walk 5 blocks to make a copy now.
Yeah.
Here, everything was right there, and there were 6 classrooms, and
Nice lunchroom and
Yeah, a nice lunchroom right here and then a big gym behind there.
I remember taking that picture. It had just had classes for the last time in May of 1998. And I was so disappointed. I lived one block from there and I was looking forward to my son starting there and it closed.
Well, the other thing, that the road came up there, they were at the dead end road and it went around the school. And there was a hill over here, so the kids could sleigh ride and the playground he put was here with the blacktop area. So, yeah, it was really a nice school, a nice place to.
And there was a ball diamond behind it, right? Cause
Yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And then there was a smaller one in the playground off to the right of the screen, a blacktop area with basketball.
Basketball hoops,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, okay, any questions?
I just wanna say, we went to, I was a member of Readstown Ramblers, so we had 4-H. Yeah, and then also like my friends, like Mick Wee and Shelley, they went to Folsom Hustlers, had it at the Folsom School.
Oh.
And they had community club there too.
Yeah.
I can remember going there quite a bit.
Well, it was kind of a shame to lose the Spring Valley School in a way, but the foundation was bad and there was just too much repair. So. And it is preserved, I mean, they do, people do use it.
Is that building still there?
Yeah.
Yes, and
So sad.
it is owned by Mike Calloway, and that's Crazy Frank's son, and it is full of fireworks.
Completely took out all the walls in there, and it's big fireworks repository.
I remember my parents went to the new Lutheran church.
Yes.
Before that church was
We
built,
went there.
we went to the church in that.
Yeah, yeah, in the gym.
I don't think you could do that now, I don't think you could use a school for church meetings, but back then, we did, yeah. I don't know, did anyone have any questions on the history of Readstown, that part?
You had talked about the Manning, I believe, country school. Was that located near the cemetery?
No, it's, I grew up on that farm. The steps are still there, the little foundation of cemetery. It's, Larson Road and Harrison Road.
I know somewhat Harrison Road.
Cause like the River Road in Readstown, you go,
You have that, the
it's right
cheese
where it
factory,
ends, right
you know,
there.
it has the cheese factory, right?
Yeah,
Well,
it's,
the cheese factory's still there.
Yeah.
And you go right past the cheese factory, just over that bridge, and it's on the.
that farm on the hill my brother has big, bins. 3 or 4 big bins, so you could definitely see it. And then right below that, next to the road, the foundation of that Manning school is still there.
This is the schoolhouse that was in the tourist park at Readstown. And thankfully, they had the picture here at the museum. We don't have a very good picture of that school. And it was a double-decker school. It was big.
Yeah.
So did they just tear it down?
It was there for quite a while and it was used as a house. But I don't know at what point it was removed, probably after one of those floods, because it sat really low in there.
What years did they have the free movies down in the park?
Well, the businessmen had those down, were those strictly in the 60s,
And
do
the
you think? I think it was
60s.
No, it was in the 70s too. 'Cause
into the 70s. That was kind of a wild time in Readstown, because around that village square, Readstown has always been known to not have a shortage of taverns and bars. And, but some of the older, I shouldn't say that because I'm getting old myself, but people in my mom's generation, they still wistfully talk about going to Readstown for the dances, she was from Gays Mills, but Readstown was the place to go for. And so, the people would come to town, their kids would go in the park and they'd go in the bars. you know, so back then you could get away with doing that, but yeah, the free shows, I mean, there'd be cars parked up and down the,
It was
Fourth
fun.
Street, yeah, it really was.
We used to go to Glass General.
Yes, and I
Glass
wanted to
General
mention
store.
Glass General because I grew up in the sixties and seventies in Readstown, and I mean, Glass General store was the place to go for groceries. It was very sad when that ended up closing permanently. It happened shortly after the school consolidation, when the elementary closed at Readstown. Cause the teachers and the parents really supported that. You know, you would go by there when school let out and you would all these people shopping there.
Roy's, and you could charge there.
Yeah, you can let you charge groceries
Yeah.
there, yeah.
One other thing we should mention is the Readstown Library. We have a really nice library, and Janie Fortney was the librarian for years. And I'll have to tell you a story. My grandson got off the bus one night, and he was supposed to call home at Glass's store, and it was closed. So one of the other kids said, "We're just going to Apple's." You know, I can't go into Apple's.
At least Village Inn.
Yeah. So he had to go home, so he went into Atlas, and he goes, "Nana, do you know who's in there? The library lady."
What happened was, Jamie and John Syme were instrumental in starting the library, and it was in several different locations, even the bank building, and then a house, and an insurance office, and then, when they built the new municipal building, they had the library, and then when Richard Lowe's manufacturing plant burned, he built a new one up at Sugar Grove, and they gave their office building to the village for a library. And it's a very nice building, very nice.
What's the sign building, it used to be an opera house? Is that right?
No, the Opera House is one of the few buildings still there. It's a big cement block building. Sign furniture was next door.
What was next?
Like there's a house and then sign furniture. Yeah, that Opera House, was built, I think, in 1914, and that was a place where they had a lot of dances.
Wow, that was great.
Yeah, and it became it's an apartment building now. So that right there is where sign furniture was,
Okay.
and that was torn down in the last couple of years, you should say. The, Cheryl and Monty Sign moved the furniture business up here to Brooklyn, I don't know, it must have been the 80s or something. So, yeah. I thought I had some slides of,
Who was your, I was gonna ask who your, postmaster was for your many years, the lady.
That's,
well, we had Bev Farrell,
That's it.
and then Marion McDonald was a postmaster. The last postmaster we had was Diane Roy. And then once she left and went down to Gays Mills, they never appointed another postmaster. Readstown is under, well, the postmaster at Lafarge oversees Viola, I believe, and Readstown.
I have a funny story though about Beth.
Farrell.
Beth Farrell. When she was postmaster in Readstown, Buzz's, my husband Buzz Geist, his mom and dad lived outside of town. And Buzz's sister lived out in Washington DC. She decided to send a Father's Day card to her dad. So she sent two of them. The first one, she had it addressed fully. The second one, she just put Dad and put the zip code. He got the card.
Oh my.
Wouldn't happen today. It had many stamps on it. I got it returned, came back, and Beth figured it out.
Oh,
She looked at it and said, "Oh, this came from DC. This has got to be Lamont stock." She got it out to it.
that's great.
That was all she had.
How many of you are familiar with the Kickapoo Pearls, the big newspaper? It was that Kickapoo Valley History Project back in the late 70s. It's so fun to read those, and Bev Farrell gave an interview talking about the early days of when she was the postmaster in that one, did I go past the post offices? Yeah. She was a postmaster when it started out there, and she would go there in the morning and there'd be snow that had come in under the door, and the ink, they wrote with the fountain pens and the ink would be frozen, and then you'd have to get the wood stove going, and then the ink bottles would explode. It was a neat article to read, but those Kickapoo Valley girls are great. Yes.
The Kickapoo Valley Reserve has copies, we reprinted that a few years ago.
Oh, you did?
Yes, so it's a large format.
Yes, it is. And I
That's
got a
available,
lot.
And also the pop book about some pearls and.
Yeah, Rose Poff
Rose Pop
and Gertrude Fraser.
Fraser,
Yeah,
Those
because,
are also available there.
yeah, that was the one I was referencing before,
Yeah.
because I used that for some of the, I mean, they have a picture of that double-decker school in there, that wood one, that you just can't find anywhere. So, yeah, that book, I love that book, and they took a lot of photos,
Yes.
you know, and put a lot of work into that little book. I heard they were trying, Gertrude Fraser's father was the publisher of the local paper. And they were trying to show that the Kickapoo Valley wasn't full of heathens and criminals. Because the Grandstaff murders, and then there was another famous robbery, Horseman, or what was that one? Does anyone remember it?
No, but you know, the one that, I don't remember which one of the women, but was at a revival. She was going to school in La Crosse and went to a revival.
Oh.
They were criticizing.
That's what
They were
brought
all
that up.
heathens.
Yes, yes, yes.
And she decided, I'm gonna prove that we're not.
Yeah, and that is a wonderful book, and it came out about the time the railroad came, didn't it? Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Chuck. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
Did you say that the post office in the top left?
Yeah, that was the second location.
Okay, and was that still standing?
It is,
Yeah,
that brown.
yeah,
At one time, the landowner, when Guy Nix owned that, he offered that to the Historical Society to have a museum there. And we would have loved that, but we knew we could never afford to fix that up. And the village, we're so fortunate, they let us have our museum room in the municipal building. We don't have to budget for electricity or heat or insurance. They don't budget any money for us, but we have earned through chili suppers and calendars. But, yeah, we're very, very fortunate, but, that building is still there, and the first one, I believe, was a little house right next door where that, Austin, where I mentioned him, William Austin, he was the first postmaster. So, yeah, that building is still there. It sits up on a hill, but you have to realize back in the day, before they did the cut through for the highway, that you came and went up over a tall hill to drop down to the river. And I saw a picture many years ago of a gentleman standing in that cut with a shovel, and they had dug that cut through there. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. You've been a great audience.